Introduction to General Assembly documentation is our topic today. This is what we're going to cover within the next hour. So I'm going to give you a brief general overview, some facts about the General Assembly and how it works. We will talk about the agenda of the General Assembly, a very important and crucial document. I will say something about document types that are typically produced by the General Assembly. Okay, so these might be well-known facts, but I will state them nonetheless. So the General Assembly, it is the biggest body of the United Nations. All 193 member states are represented in this organ, and each member state has one vote. So this makes it the main deliberative, policy-making, and representative organ of the international organization. And it is governed by the rules of procedure. There have been 20 revisions since they were first adopted in December 47. So we put in a link to the current version in the presentation that was shared with you. So the General Assembly has the broadest mandate of all the UN organs, and this is based on Article 10 of the UN Charter, which says that the General Assembly may discuss any questions or any matters within the scope of the present Charter. So this makes it a pretty broad scope. So among other agenda items, there are a few I want to highlight. So the General Assembly examines and approves the budget. It elects the non-permanent members of the Security Council. It elects the members of the Economic and Social Council, the judges of the International Court of Justice, and members of other subsidiary and special organs. And last but not least, upon recommendation by the Security Council, it elects the Secretary General. The General Assembly works in sessions, so the session always starts in September of a given year and ends in September of the following year. And the main part is taking place from September to December, so usually the budget is the last big thing that is being discussed and decided on, and that usually concludes the main part of the General Assembly. So this is for the regular sessions, but the General Assembly can also meet in special sessions. These are usually topical. So the last one took place in 2016, and that related to the world drug problem. And the General Assembly can meet in emergency special sessions. So, and these take place usually in response to a political crisis. So we have some unfortunate examples for this. So, for example, the Ukraine situation. So this emergency special session started in 2020, or with relation to the current situation in Palestine and Israel. There's an ongoing emergency special session, which I think I'm not sure when it started, 2020 maybe, but this has been ongoing for many years. So these are the types of sessions of the General Assembly. A bit about how the General Assembly is structured. So here you have this nice image. We have not produced this ourselves, but we borrowed this from the GA handbook. You can also see a link here. This is an excellent resource on everything concerning the General Assembly and its processes, and a bit about the behind the scenes. It's produced by the Permanent Mission of Switzerland. So this is really, I can only recommend this resource. And this is where we got this image from. So the procedural and organizational issues for a GA General Assembly session are dealt with in the General Committee and in the Credentials Committee. The General Committee is chaired by the President of the General Assembly. And its voting members consist of the 21 vice presidents, as well as the 6 chairs of the main committees. So the General Committee deals with the agenda, with agenda items. It makes recommendations of what to include, of what to postpone, and it allocates agenda items either to the plenary or to one of the main committees. Then we have the Credentials Committee that consists of 9 members, and they make recommendations to the General Assembly regarding the credentials of delegations. So this is the organizational part of it. The substantive issues are discussed in the plenary or in one of the main committees. So you have the plenary here. You have, of course, the president, who I already mentioned, and the 21 vice presidents chairing the plenary. And then we have the 6 main committees, and the main committees are each concerned with specific topics or areas of expertise. So the first committee is the Disarmament and International Security Committee. The second is the Economic and Financial Committee, and so on. So they do more work related to specific topics. So, and under this structure, we have a huge variety of subsidiary bodies of the General Assembly. These can be boards, commissions, working groups, panels. So we cannot list all of them here. But you can consult the General Assembly website if you want further information on this. But this is a fluent field because ad hoc committees, for example, can still be established. So moving on to the agenda. As I said in the beginning, the agenda is a very central document because everything the General Assembly does is based on the agenda. So the agenda is issued for each session. It's usually about 300 or over 300 items long and covers a wide variety of topics. And all the documents that the General Assembly issues are in relation to at least one agenda item. They can also be in relation to a variety of agenda items, but it is always in relation to at least one. The agenda is adopted at the beginning of a new session, but items can still be included or excluded at any point in the process. So, and here's an overview of how the agenda is created, because this takes some time and effort. So for the agenda to be adopted in September, in the same year in February, the first document is issued. And this is the preliminary agenda that proposes items to be included in the agenda. This we usually have in February. Then we go on to June, and this is when a pretty interesting document comes out, which is the annotated agenda. So now we have a bit more, a better idea of what will be included in the agenda, because this is being developed. But what this document also offers is a history of each item that is proposed for inclusion, and it refers to related records, related reports like resolutions and meeting records. So let's quickly jump into this document to give you an idea what it looks like. So here, we are in the 74th session. So here you can see this was issued in June. And here you have the list of all the document symbols and their numbers. Now we scroll down, we have an awful lot of agenda items. So down here, let's go to agenda item 10. Here you get the information when the item was included in the agenda, because many agenda items, maybe the majority of them, are recurring. They will be in the agenda every year, so that you get the information when it was included, which resolutions were adopted in relation to it, and you get all the links to the related documents here. So this is really a very useful document. It can happen, and it usually does happen, that for some agenda items, the information is not there yet. Here you can see this X instead of a page number. So this will be issued later in an addendum. Then this will come out later. So with this, we are in June. Then we move on till September. There are a few other documents giving more form to the agenda until finally in the second plenary meeting of the session, the agenda is adopted and you have a listing of all the items that will be considered at a given session. At the same meeting, the allocation of agenda items is adopted, and this is a list of items that are allocated to either the plenary or the main committee. So you have an agenda item which will either be discussed in the plenary or one of the main committees, and this document tells you where this takes place. So this is, but still, items can still be added. And this will have be issued in an addendum then. So this is still not set in stone. Changes are still possible to this. If you have attended one of our introductory trainings to UN documents, you might be familiar with UN document symbols, because each UN document has a document symbol. And these are the symbols down here, the A/74/50. So the document with the number 50 will always be the preliminary agenda, and all these numbers are standardized, so that makes it a bit easier to find agenda documentation. It's just the session information. So now we would have 78. That changes, but the numbers stay the same, and this standardization enables you to find agenda documentation relatively easily. We've seen that agenda items can be allocated either to the plenary or to one of the main committees. So we have two scenarios. So let's look at each of them. So first is the agenda item is allocated to the plenary. So in this case, we have an agenda item. Here we are in the 71st session. I can see this from the document symbol. And here, agenda item number 14 was culture of peace. So this was examined in an SG report, a report of the Secretary General. This report is then discussed in meetings. So the question culture of peace is examined in plenary meetings. So these are meeting records. This you can see from the PV, the procès-verbaux. This is a meeting record of the General Assembly. So during one of these meetings, a draft resolution is presented. This is a document symbol of a draft resolution, and it is adopted. And it gets another document symbol. So we have two documents here. We have a draft resolution and we have the adopted resolution. And this can happen in another meeting too. Again, a draft resolution and the adopted resolution. So now an agenda item is allocated to one of the main committees. In our example here, we have an example from the second committee. Again, we have an agenda item. This time it's number 21, globalization and interdependence. We have a Secretary General's report on this agenda item. And then the question is discussed in a meeting of the second committee. So here we have the meeting records of the second committee. Here we see we have an SR that shows us it's a summary record. It's a different type of meeting record. We will talk about this in a bit. So we have the meetings. Again, a draft resolution is presented. We have the draft resolution here, and it is adopted. But now we do not immediately have a resolution, but the draft resolution that is adopted on the committee level will be included in the final draft, in the report of the committee. So always the final draft resolution is included in the committee's report to the plenary. Then it's considered by the plenary. Again, we have a meeting record, and there it is adopted, and then we have the resolution as a separate document with a resolution document symbol. So there's one additional step, so to say, when an agenda item is allocated to a main committee. So we've seen that during these processes, a variety of documents are produced. So let's look at them in a bit more detail. So first we had reports of the Secretary General on our agenda items. The Secretary General submits reports to the principal organs on topics that are mandated by resolutions, and they cover a huge variety, especially when we look at the General Assembly. They cover a huge variety of topics, which can be peacekeeping operations, political situations, HR, reforms, legal topics. So a variety of topics is possible here. We've looked at document symbols. So when looking for reports of the Secretary Generally, please note that there's no distinguishing document symbol for them. So you will not see from the document symbol that it is a Secretary General's report. But in our databases, there are ways to look for SG reports. So we can have Secretary General reports, and another type of report that's specific to the General Assembly are the sessional reports that are submitted to it by its subsidiary bodies. So the principal organs, so the other principal organs and the subsidiary bodies of the General Assembly report on their activities. They do this on an annual or a biannual basis. And these reports contain all kinds of documentation related to the work of this body during a specific time frame. So they will include summaries of discussions that were held. They will include decision texts, and we have seen they will include proposed draft resolutions. And again, some of them have standardized document symbols. So the report of the Secretary General always has the document symbol A/session information /1. The Security Council report is always number 2, Economic and Social Council number 3, and ICJ is number 4. So again, we have standardized document symbols, which can make research easier. So the reports feed into meetings, and for meetings, we have meeting records. Meeting records contain speeches, statements, and they also contain actions that were taken, voting information. So you can see how the member states voted on a specific draft resolution. They can also contain decision texts. And there are 2 types of meeting records. For one, there are the verbatim records, French procès-verbaux, and these contain the full first-person account of the proceedings of a meeting. So you get word-by-word information of what was said during a meeting. So in here we have an example. When you see it was written in the first person, you know that this is a verbatim record. The other type of meeting record are summary records. And these are written in the third person, and they do not give you the word-by-word information, but they provide a condensed version of the proceedings of a meeting. So you will be informed about everything that happened during a meeting. And here in our example, you see it's written in the third person that she said that her delegation did this and that. UN bodies that are entitled to meeting records either have one type or the other. And in the General Assembly, it's the plenary and the first committee that are entitled to verbatim records. All other that have meeting records usually have summary records. So our meeting is taking place. A draft resolution is introduced. This can, as we have seen, this can happen on the plenary or on the committee level. And draft resolutions are usually indicated by an L in the document system. We have seen this in the overview, but here you see an example of the plenary and one of the committee. The L in the document symbol usually tells you that this is a draft. As every General Assembly document, draft resolutions relate to an agenda item, and they are sponsored by member states. Generally, it's the main sponsor that introduces the draft in a meeting or tables the draft, and other sponsors can add their names at various points. And the final draft resolutions that are adopted on the committee level are contained in the committee's report to the plenary, as we have seen in the second scenario. About these reports of the main committees. So for each agenda item, there's a report of the main committee, and the report includes discussions on the topic and these final versions of the draft resolutions. When doing research regarding to these, it's interesting to see that these reports do not have committee document symbols. So they don't indicate the committee. So you don't see, committees are usually indicated by C, C1, C2, C3 in the document symbol. But the committee reports do not have this information because these reports are considered working documents for the plenary. And so the document symbol indicates that it's a plenary document and not a committee document. That's why you do not have the committee information in the document symbol. So we have our draft resolutions and action is taken on them, so they are voted on. The majority of General Assembly resolutions are adopted without a vote. And if there is a vote, there are two ways to document it. You can first have a recorded vote, which must be requested before the voting is conducted. And this recorded vote clearly identifies the position of each member state. The other option is a summary of the vote result, which provides the numbers of votes, how many voted yes, how many voted no, but it does not identify individual member states' positions. The voting has taken place, and if the draft resolution is adopted, we have a resolution. So a resolution, that is the formal expression of the opinion or of the will of the General Assembly. And it is published as an individual document with its own document symbol, which always starts with A/RES for resolution. We have resolutions and we have decisions. Decisions, they designate more formal actions, for example, regarding meeting times and places, nominations of officials, or just a body is considering a report that was submitted to it. So these are usually things that decisions are taken about. And these are not published individually, so they are not assigned individual document symbols. But if you're looking for decisions, there's something which is called the annual compilation of resolutions of decisions. This is published for each session of the General Assembly, and these compilation volumes contain the decision texts.
I'm going to go over using the digital library, a few searches that we commonly get asked for at the reference desk that relate to the General Assembly specifically. Some of this will be repeat if you've attended our UN Intro to UN documents. Some of it will be specific to the General Assembly. So one of the things to keep in mind when you're finding a UN document, you'll notice that I did this in the chat. When you have a document symbol, you can simply add it to the end of undocs.org and then type in your document symbol there. Just one word of caution about using this. When you click through to the document, that link is not a stable URL that cannot be shared. So you really do need to type, when you're sharing it, you share undocs.org and then the document symbol. The other thing to keep in mind with this trick is that it's only going to pick up that particular document that you're looking for, and it's not going to pick up any addendums, amendments, revisions, or corrections of the document. But it is a trick that we use. You can see I used it in the training, and it's a really quick way to find a document. When you're actually doing some searching, we recommend using the digital library. The digital library lets you search for documents from the General Assembly, and it allows you to narrow by the type of document you're looking for. The agenda item is very useful to know about because every document in the General Assembly is assigned to an agenda. So I'm going to show you how you can do that search. You can also do searches to find out who sponsored a particular draft resolution. There's the voting records as well available in the General Assembly, and that is for adopted resolutions. You can see how member states voted. And then we have our index to speeches. So the index to speeches is a way to find out how member states, what member states said on a particular subject at a particular meeting. It goes back to 1983 for the General Assembly generally for the meetings. And then if you're talking about the general debate, which is that first week that the General Assembly is meeting, that goes back all the way to 1946. So that's just some things to keep in mind when you're talking about the digital library. And now I'm going to show you a few searches related to that. The General Assembly has an agenda that comes out every year that sort of says what the General Assembly will be considering for that year. All of the records in the digital library have that agenda information associated with it, and it can give you some very useful information. If you click on that link, you can find all the agenda items associated with that session. So I'm going to go to the digital library now. I'm going to say no thanks to the chat service, but if you ever do have a question, you can always use that chat service for a question. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to type in mercenaries as a search. Now with the digital library, if you want your most recent documents at the top, you need to go under options and then choose year descending to get your most recent documents at the top. I'm going to say I want General Assembly documents. And I'm going to scroll past the Human Rights Councils, that's what that HRC one is, and look at a straight General Assembly document here. When I click on a result here, you can see I can download the documents here. I can download the documents here, and I can view the document down here. Now, when I look at the record here, you can see there's this agenda item information here. And in this case, this agenda item is related to the rights of peoples for self-determination of peoples. And when I click on that link there, I get this code up here. You can just ignore that code, but what you will see is all the related documents to that agenda item that are out. So you can see there, this A78-251, that is the indication that you're looking at the agenda, right? That's the adopted agenda number. The 70 indicates that this is the number 70 in that agenda thing. And then this title is Rights of the People, Self-Determination, Self-Determinations of Peoples. This Self-Determinations of Peoples in capital letters indicates that this is, in fact, the agenda subject, which is something that the library assigns. And the purpose of this agenda subject, when I click on this, you see I get 2 documents because I'm getting it only for 2023. So those are the documents that are out now. But if I wanted to look at past years, by the way, I'm getting mercenaries because it's down here in the subject. I can do a search within the agenda. So if I go to the advanced search now, and I put in self-determinations of people, and I select as my field agenda and click on search, and I go options year, I'm getting all of the documents related to self-determinations of people as an agenda item. And you can see, I can say I want General Assembly, draft resolutions, and this gets me all of the draft resolutions on self-determination. I can say I want the meeting records, and I can narrow by date here, so I can find all the meeting records related to that over the year. Or I can say I want all the resolutions. Or I want all of the voting data. And so the voting data is going to tell me how member states voted in a particular resolution. So I see here one that is related to mercenaries specifically. When I click on this one, the information I get when I'm in the voting data will tell me the title of the resolution. It will tell me the agenda item. So this is self-determinations. I actually also see there's an agenda item that is mercenaries specifically. I see the related resolution, the related meeting record, the related draft resolution, the related committee report. So if, for instance, I wanted to see what the committees were saying on a particular agenda item, and if maybe there was voting in the committee level, I can look at the committee report. I then get my vote summary that tells me how many member states voted yes, how many member states voted no, how many abstains, how many didn't vote, and I can see that they voted Y, N, or Y or N. I'm just going to show you here with this mercenaries, again, this is the agenda subject. So I could do a search here, doing a similar search, doing that advanced search. And I'm going to put in, mercenaries as my agenda. And then I can say, look at, let's say, look at 2022 General Assembly. And I'm getting all of the speeches related to mercenaries, the voting record, the meeting records, and there's a meeting record as well. And then I could get like the draft resolutions related to mercenaries as well. So you can see there's one that's rights of people to self-determination, and then there's another one that's related specifically to mercenaries. So that's using that agenda field, knowing that you can find all of the documents related to a particular agenda item that's being considered by the General Assembly. This is another example here where you're looking at peacekeeping financing. And again, when you click on that link within the record to the agenda item, you get an exact phrase thing. This is just coding, ignore it, but it will give you all of the related items to that agenda item. And then if you wanted to search across sessions, so not just the current session, but past sessions, you can use that agenda subject. So in this case, it's peacekeeping operations and financing. And so then you would choose agenda as your search and you would run your search that way. Another question that we get a lot in the library is who sponsored a resolution. And the important thing to remember with sponsorship of a resolution is that it's in the draft resolution. You cannot find the sponsors of a resolution in the draft resolution. And additional sponsors can be added to a draft resolution at any point through an addendum or a revision. The main sponsor usually tables the draft or introduces the draft in a meeting. And in order to find the main sponsor, it's useful to look at the meeting record to see where that draft resolution is sponsored. So if you want to search to find who sponsored a resolution by a particular member state, if I go back to the digital library here and I do an advanced search, this advanced search, if I go to the author field, I can then look for the sponsor of a draft resolution. So let's say I say Netherlands as my author. I click on search. Again, I want to go under options, choose year to get my most recent ones at the top. And on the side here, I can choose draft resolutions. And I can say General Assembly specifically. And then when I click on one of these records here, I can see the Netherlands here is listed as Netherlands, and the list of all the co-sponsors are here. In the case of this particular document, because it is new, we don't yet have a resolution, we don't yet have a committee report, but if I were to look at past ones, those would be linked. So I could find my draft resolution, it would link to the related resolution, and it would link to the related committee report. But you can see there's my agenda item, and my agenda information, and my subject terms. So that's one way. If you're looking to see, for instance, everything that the Netherlands has sponsored, you could do a search like that. If you wanted to see who sponsored resolutions that relate to women, again, if you go into the advanced search here, you can choose women as your agenda item, click on search, click on draft resolutions, and you can find resolutions that have been sponsored by particular member states. I see Colombia is listed here as an example. So if I wanted to see what other resolutions Colombia has sponsored related to women, I could choose, again, Colombia as the author. And I get the draft resolutions that Colombia has sponsored related to women. Again, I want to go year descending to get my most recent ones first. So that's how you can search for the draft resolution if you're looking to see what a member state has sponsored or who has sponsored resolutions related to a particular topic, or if you have the draft resolution symbol, that also works. So there's that example of looking for women in the title in this case. So if you know the resolution has women, the draft resolution has women in the title, you could search for that, or you could search for the agenda if you wanted to as well. When you're looking for the main sponsor, as I said before, what you are looking for is who introduced the draft resolution in the meeting record. There's no easy way to do this other than looking at the meeting record and reading. However, you can do a full text search and you can potentially find something through there. I'll just show you an example of that. Let's say I want to find out I know that Australia introduced something on behalf of a number of states. I can do a search that says representative of Australia on behalf of, and then I can turn the full text search on. It's now searching the document and it's looking for that. Again, I want to choose year and then meeting records here. And in this meeting record, it will say that the representative of Australia introduced a particular resolution on behalf of. The one thing to keep in mind, and so then when I searched in the full text, if I search for Australia, you know, I did this wrong because I think it's not picking it up that way. Doesn't matter. The point being that that's an imperfect way to search for it anyway, because you are saying representative on behalf of, but maybe they say representative to introduce draft resolution, all of these things. The language is not consistent throughout, so this search is not perfect. So again, the best way to look for it is to look in the meeting record of the draft resolution. When you're looking for statements, statements can be found by searching the speeches collection of the UN Digital Library. So that's the thing I was indicating at the beginning when we talk about the index to speeches going back to 1983. Here, the voting data and the speeches collection are sort of specialized collections within the digital library, and they have specialized search interfaces. So when I go into the advanced search here, I can look for speeches by a particular member state. You'll see my drop-down menu is a little bit different when I'm in speeches. So I would say Mexico as country organization, and let's say I say peacekeeping as my agenda. Now here you see when you're searching for speeches that the only way to search for a particular topic is by agenda. And this agenda is looking at that agenda subject, those capitalized letters that I was talking about before. You can't search by title or by subject here. You would choose agenda. That's kind of like your subject search. I run my search for Mexico and peacekeeping. Again, year descending to get the most recent ones. And I'm going to say General Assembly. And now here you can see I have a meeting record. It's the 5th committee or the 6th committee, and it's about criminal accountability of UN officials and experts on missions. So this is peacekeeping, criminal liability. Now, the important thing to note here, you'll see there's no text of that speech, but the speech itself is contained within this meeting record. And so then here, when I look, I can see the speech by the representative of Mexico there. So it's a way to find out when Mexico spoke on a particular topic as it relates to the agenda. Finally, I'll talk about the voting data here. The voting data is going to give you voting information about draft resolutions, or sorry, about adopted resolutions in the General Assembly and Security Council. So if I say outer space as an example here, I can filter on the side by the General Assembly. And when I'm in the voting collection itself, I can say I want resolutions adopted with a vote. I'm going to go under options year to get my most recent one. And you can see these subjects, again, are those agenda subjects here. So here's an example here where there's a resolution. I've got the voting information here. How many member states voted yes? How many voted no? How many abstained? How many didn't vote? And your total number of members here. And you can see when there's nothing, it means they didn't vote. When there's an N, it means they voted no. When there's a Y, they voted yes. And you've got your related committee report, your related draft resolution, your related meeting record, and your related resolution, all contained within that voting information.
We just have a question coming in chat. Is there a way to keep track of all documents issued under the same agenda item across the years, even if the agenda item number changes?
Yes, that is the agenda subject. That is why, if we look again, if I look at this one here, this information here is giving you that this is the 77th session. This is telling you that it's 97C. This is the title. The title could potentially change over time, but this subject thing here doesn't change over time. That's why when you want to do a search for an agenda item that may have changed the name of it, but not necessarily the subject, you want to use these subject searching here. So then if I were to say, do my search here, and I go look at it, advanced search, and I say disarmament agreements, outer space. You can see now I've going back previous years too, because I am looking for that agenda subject. So if I click on the 43rd session in this case, you can see disarmament agreements here. That's why I'm picking it up. And then here, outer space. Now, in this case, what I did was I was searching for it as all of these words. If I wanted particularly disarmament agreements, outer space, if I change that to partial phrase, that should change so that it is partial phrases, like putting it in quotation marks, because in the previous example, I found disarmament agreements as an agenda and outer space as an agenda. When I change it to partial phrase, now I'm finding it as disarmament agreements, outer space, all in one tag there. So just to touch on a few of the products that are available when you're looking at General Assembly research in specific here. One is the Table of Resolutions. Our Table of Resolutions does have General Assembly documents, all related resolutions. You'll find a lot of this information is available in other places, but this goes all the way back to the first session. It will tell you the related resolution, whether it was considered by a committee, the agenda numbers, the meeting records, the draft resolution, and the topic. So a little bit the agenda there. Just one thing to note, especially these days, we've got our regular session here, but if you're looking at things that the General Assembly has done under the emergency special session, you need to go into emergency special session here. And then our special sessions are also here if you're looking at resolutions that passed in the special session. Just note too, when you're looking at special sessions, it's indicated with an S and then the number of the special session, and emergency special sessions are E and then the number there, ES, and the number there. The meeting records do take a while to come out. So this has been the case recently where we get lots of questions about what happened in that meeting. Until the meeting records come out, this is where we refer people to. One place we refer people to is the press releases. So the press releases are not official documents, but they come out very quickly. So if you are on the press website here, so press.un.org/en, General Assembly, you go to meetings coverage. You can see here the third committee met yesterday, and this is what the third committee said. So this will give you a description of everything that happened. You can see as I scroll down, you've got a little bit of a summary of what the different member states said and what their positions were. So that press release will tell you if there's voting, it will tell you possibly texts of resolutions, that sort of thing. Now, the detail will vary depending on how much was covered in a particular meeting. I have seen cases where the press release will say, 13 resolutions were passed on this day, and you're like, okay, but which ones, but that meeting, they're just sort of going through things quickly. And then other meetings might be on one particular topic, and then it will go into great detail. Another place to look for speeches before they come out is the UN Journal. So the UN Journal is published every day. It's a daily program of meetings. There's summaries of meetings that were previously held. For interest for us, maybe not for you, but maybe for you, there is a list of all the UN documents that are issued that day. But this is what's really quite useful, I find, to people researching, is the e-statements submitted by member states. So again, this is not the official record of what happened in the meeting, but if I go to the journal and let's say I go to yesterday, and I look at the General Assembly here, the first committee met. When you see this little E sign here, you can see statements that member states have submitted in whatever language of the official languages they choose to submit it in. And this is a statement that's coming from Indonesia. This is what Indonesia is planning on saying. It's what's been submitted to the journal The official meeting is the official record, but in the meantime, if you're looking to see what Egypt said, you can go to the UN Journal. You can see if Egypt has submitted something and if it's submitted it in a language that you understand. So that's another place you can go for information, is the UN Journal. Just finally, I just want to point out a few things here. We've got UN member states on the record. This is a place that you can go to find direct access to official documents for particular member states. So if you were looking, for instance, at Jamaica and you wanted to know everything that Jamaica co-sponsored, there's already a saved search that's there. You can also see when Jamaica was a member of ECOSOC, a member of Security Council, that sort of thing there. We have a General Assembly research guide, so anything we didn't cover during this training, you can go to the General Assembly research guide. What I find it is very useful for is just sort of wrapping your head around the agenda. There is a section here on the agenda, but you can also find, for instance, how does voting happen in the General Assembly? So it's a lot of what we've covered today, but you can also find it there. If you're doing historic research, you want to know what the General Assembly did in the past, the UN Yearbook is a very good source for that. It goes all the way back to the very beginning of the UN. The GA Handbook, I would also confirm that this is a really useful guide, not just in knowing GA documentation, but also knowing in the work of the GA. So some things that the GA does is related to tradition or like standardized practice, but there's no necessary rule to that. The GA handbook will tell you things like, for instance, the Sixth Committee tends to adopt resolutions by consensus, you know, like those sort of practices, or this is what goes on with negotiating a draft resolution before it even becomes a draft resolution. So it's very useful handbook. The Government of New Zealand also puts out one, the UN handbook. This will tell you a lot about the subsidiary organs of the General Assembly and who sits on particular bodies. So it's very useful as well. And then if you're a delegate, there's the Delegates Handbook that will not only tell you a little bit about how the GA works, but also things like how to reserve a room, what services the library offers, that sort of thing there. So those are all very useful handbooks to use in consultation when you're dealing with the General Assembly or working with the General Assembly. You can always reach out to us, contact us through our email, through the website, through Ask. You saw the chat earlier. If you click on any of the contact us, it does get to us and we do respond quickly. So do feel free to reach out.
There's a question we cannot answer. Somebody's asking how they can upload video statements on Web TV. This is something that is not managed by us. Let me see if I can send you some information on that. I'm looking for something, so I will send you a link.
I don't know. And I don't know for the General Assembly, but I know for the Security Council that they sort of have to make exceptions to the rule to allow for a video statement. Maybe the General Assembly does, but if that's the case, it's not us that you would talk to. So, well, again, thank you very much for attending this session. We hope you found it useful. And if you do have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to us. We are here to help you with any sort of research that you are doing, if it's related to our books, but also related to UN documents and the way the UN works. So thank you very much. Have a good day.